Please, God, I know I kind of talk to you in a way I shouldn't, but tonight, can you put Matt Damon on Jimmy Kimmel? I really need to see Matt Damon on Jimmy Kimmel. Please, God. Well, Donald Trump doesn't watch my show. He should. Maybe he does. He is stupid. Who knows? He would probably enjoy this garbage. I wish Donald Trump watched my show because I read a lot. I talk to smart people, and sometimes I get things right. And on yesterday's show, I said, despite what Trump and Putin want you to believe, Putin doesn't hold all the cards in Ukraine. Go back and watch that show. Maybe Donald Trump does, because on Tuesday, he said he's had a change of heart. He told reporters that Ukraine can win back all the territory it has given up to Russia. This is in the Wall Street Journal now. Trump, according to the Wall Street Journal, no longer believes Ukraine has to surrender any territory for a peace deal. Remember the big meeting in the Oval Office with Zelensky earlier in the year? Watch yesterday's show. I talked about this. Putin's weak. This is what Trump said on social media, quote, "After getting to know and fully understand the Ukraine-Russia military and economic situation, and after seeing the economic trouble it is causing Russia, I think Ukraine, with the support of the European Union, is in a position to fight and win all of Ukraine back in its original form." Maybe he listens to my show, or maybe he's a liar, and he treats this big UN General Assembly like an election, and he's playing to all the constituencies and telling them whatever they want to hear. Yeah, I think that's what it is. A new Washington Post poll says 76% of all Americans say President Trump does not deserve to win the Nobel Peace Prize. 22% say he does. And this is interesting. Republicans, right? It's his party. It's split right down the middle. 49% say he deserves the Nobel. 49% say no. This is the Mop Up. I'm David Feldman in New York City. Some updates on stories that we've been following, and then I'll get to the UN General Assembly. Former Republican Congressman from New York, George Santos, expelled from the House in December of 2023 and currently serving a 7-year sentence for wire fraud and aggravated identity theft after a jury found him guilty of ripping off donors. Well, he's being tortured inside a New Jersey federal prison. At least that's according to Georgia Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, who is now saying George Santos is being kept in solitary confinement 24 hours a day with no opportunity to go outside. He's only getting 3 showers a week and forced to drink water from the sink near his toilet. In the past, Marjorie Taylor Greene has complained of jail conditions for January 6ers held inside Washington, D.C. Central Detention Facility. That was before Donald Trump released them earlier in the year. Marjorie Taylor Greene, seen here using air quotes. So obviously she's either talking about slavery or the Holocaust, because I'm pretty sure Marjorie, when she says slavery or the Holocaust, uses air quotation marks. Anyway, Marjorie Taylor Greene complained of inadequate sanitation, rotten food, and cramped conditions for the January 6ers inside that Washington jail. So when it's people she cares about, suddenly our prisons, our jails, our ICE detention centers are third world torture chambers. But no calls for shutting down Alligator Alcatraz or the network of for-profit prisons that's about to see explosive growth thanks to one big beautiful bill. Or the loophole in the 13th Amendment that allows state prisons to lease inmates to corporations who pay the prisoners literally pennies on the dollar if they pay them anything at all. Because right now, in Texas. We have black prisoners picking cotton for free. Yeah, we don't hear Marjorie Taylor Greene complaining about that. Or this guy, Border Czar Tom Homan, seen here scratching his ass. Tom Homan, the former director of ICE during the first Trump administration, spent the Biden administration as a paid consultant to the for-profit prison industry, including the largest, GEO Group, whose top executive is now the second in command over at ICE. It's funny how that works, isn't it? We don't hear Marjorie Taylor Greene, who sits on the House Oversight Committee, calling for hearings about Tom Homan and the number two guy at ICE who used to work for the for-profit GEO Group, the largest for-profit prison corporation in America. She also, Marjorie, chairs the subcommittee on the Department of Government Efficiency. Well, we don't see her holding hearings on how inefficient and deadly the for-profit prison industry is and why it's cheaper for the government to run our prisons and detention centers because they don't have to turn a profit. Our government doesn't have to turn a profit. Democrats in the House and Senate have opened up their own investigation into new reporting by MSNBC, the New York Times, and Politico that last year Tom Homan was caught on tape by the FBI accepting $50,000 cash in a plain brown paper bag from undercover agents posing as executives for a border security company looking to secure lucrative contracts in a future Trump administration. Now, defenders of Tom Homan say there's nothing illegal since he was not a government employee last year, so he was free to take $50,000 in cash in a brown paper bag. Well, he is a government employee now, and taking bribes in anticipation of a government job is illegal. Also, as I said on a previous show, what did Tom Homan do with that cash? Right? He accepted 50 grand cash in a plain paper. Who accepts 50 grand cash in a plain paper bag? Did he declare that on his taxes? Now, the FBI and the Justice Department performed that sting operation exactly 1 year ago. But the criminal investigation was shut down this year by then acting Deputy Attorney General Emil Bove. He shut it down within weeks of Trump's return to the Oval Office. So that means Homan was legally obligated to declare that 50 grand cash in a brown paper bag for the year 2024. Did he declare it? I want to know. I don't know if he's been, has he been forced to return the 50 grand to the FBI in 2025 now that the investigation has been closed? He needed to declare that on his taxes. Let's see his returns. The Trump administration, of course, calling the investigation both politically motivated and the work of the deep, dark state. By the way, this is a photograph of Tom Homan performing a loyalty ritual by kissing and then stroking a microphone moments after Donald Trump spoke, 40 minutes into it, and covered that microphone with his spit and frosty bile. That's how you prove you're loyal to Donald Trump. Well, as the Trump regime continues to silence speech, create an atmosphere where all his political opponents must watch what they say, the Secret Service announced it has launched an investigation into California Governor Gavin Newsom, who the Trump White House accused of threatening the life of puppy killer Kristi Noem, head of Homeland Security. Newsom, you see, took to Twitter saying, quote, Kristi Noem is going to have a bad day today, unquote. So the Secret Service says they will have zero tolerance for free speech like that. So the Secret Service says they're performing what is now called a threat assessment. Homeland Security called it a threat that tweet that Kristi Noem was about to have a bad day today, Noem immediately appeared on Fox News saying she felt menaced and intimidated by the California governor. Really, the head of Homeland Security is scared of a tweet saying you're about to have a bad day. And the Secret Service is being advised to look into Governor Gavin Newsom threatening the life of Kristi Noem for saying she's about to have a bad day today. So this is the head of Homeland Security. She's an imbecile. She's saying the governor of the fourth largest economy in the world, Gavin Newsom, is not allowed to tweet that she is about to have a bad day. And why did he say she's about to have a bad day? Because the state of California that day passed the No Secret Police Act, which forbids ICE agents from wearing masks in California, as well as hiding their badge numbers when making arrests. Kristi Noem called it unconstitutional. Really unconstitutional. You mean like rounding up American citizens and detaining them without due process, Kristi? Here is the asinine, woefully uneducated, witless, lying political hack Kristi Noem discussing the Constitution during testimony earlier this year before the Senate Homeland Security Committee. Here is New Hampshire Senator Jeanne Shaheen exposing just how stupid Kristi Noem, the head of Homeland Security, is. Kristi Noem, head of Homeland Security, who had her Louis Vuitton bag containing $4,000 in cash stolen right out from underneath her chair while having Easter dinner with her family this year. She was surrounded by security guards because she's the head of Homeland Security. She's supposed to keep us safe, and she can't even keep an eye on her Louis Vuitton bag containing $4,000 in cash. Who other than Tom Homan carries $4,000 in cash? If you're carrying $4,000 in cash, you're either a drug dealer or you're working for the Department of Homeland Security and you're on the take. I want to know where that $4,000 in cash came from, Kristi. Why is the head of Homeland Security carrying $4,000 in cash? Anyway, here is Kristi Noem, who says this new bill in California that forbids ICE agents from wearing masks, she says it's unconstitutional. Here she is telling us how much she knows about the Constitution.
So, Secretary Noem, what is habeas corpus?
Well, habeas corpus is a constitutional right that the president has to be able to remove people from this country and suspend their right to.
Let me stop you, ma'am.
Suspend their
habeas
right
corpus, excuse me, that's incorrect.
President
habeas
Lincoln
corpus,
used it.
President Lincoln used it. Rewind that. President Lincoln used habeas corpus. No, you cretin. President Lincoln suspended habeas corpus during the Civil War. He didn't use habeas corpus. It would be nice if the person in charge of ICE, she runs ICE, she's head of Homeland Security. It would be nice if she knew the meaning of habeas corpus. It would be nice if she knew what she was destroying. So if the Secret Service is worried about Kristi Noem's physical safety, and they should be, again, we are opposed to all violence. We're opposed to screaming and yelling on this show. I hope she's safe. Again, I think Kristi Noem is a buffoon. I don't want anything bad happening to her other than getting impeached and held legally accountable for what she's doing to our country and our Constitution, which she so obviously knows nothing about. Again, if the Secret Service is concerned about her well-being, instead of focusing on Gavin Newsom, they would be well advised to keep an eye on this guy. You are looking at Kristi Noem's de facto chief of staff over at Homeland Security, Corey Lewandowski. Corey Lewandowski works incredibly closely with Kristi Noem. And he has a storied history of being accused, sued, and charged by police for assaulting women. So the Secret Service, less time investigating Gavin Newsom for a tweet, keep an eye on Kristi Noem and Corey Lewandowski, her de facto chief of staff over at Homeland Security. In 2016, Lewandowski was charged by police in Jupiter, Florida, with assaulting a reporter named Michelle Fields after a Trump press conference in Florida. Prosecutors decided to drop the charges, but let's look at this. I mean, dear Lord, these are just some stories that I've collected. Corey Lewandowski, Donald Trump's campaign manager, charged with battery. Singer Joy Villa says she wants justice to be served in sexual assault allegations against Corey Lewandowski. Politico reports Lewandowski cast out of Trump operations after allegations of unwanted sexual advances. Trump donor Corey Lewandowski. Trump donor says Corey Lewandowski made unwanted sexual advances. So, yeah, I would keep an eye on this guy, Corey Lewandowski, who was Trump's very first campaign manager, but was let go. And then he worked as a political advisor to Kristi Noem back when she was governor of South Dakota. And he's the one working for her at Homeland Security right now, quite possibly illegally. The nature of his job requires he discloses finances. So far, he has not. He's being investigated by that. Some people in the Trump administration want him out because he is not reporting his finances. And he's busy arranging all those glamour shots of Kristi as director of Homeland Security. You know, you always see her going on ICE raids, dressed up to look like an action figure. You know, G.I. Joe in drag is what she looks. They call her Ice Barbie. I think she looks like G.I. Joe doing transvest drag queen story hour at the library. Corey thinks she's presidential material, and here's her latest look that he dreamed up. He did a makeover so Kristi would look more intelligent than she actually is. Here she is dressed to appear like Albert Einstein. And I think they did a pretty good job. This is her idea of dressing smart. Because if you want people to think you're smart, you have to look smart. But she's stupid, and she should stay away from Corey Lewandowski. By the way, I've shown that before. I'm very proud of that. I actually painted this. I didn't use AI. I actually went in and painted a photograph through Photoshop. And so I'm kind of old school. All right. So Kristi Noem is stupid. And if she was smart, which she's not, she would stay away from Corey Lewandowski because he has a dangerous history with women. And apparently, he's more than just her de facto chief of staff. He's also the de facto, but substitute the A with a U chief of staff. The de facto, but take the A and facto and replace it with a U. That's what we hear. Now both are married, but not to each other. There were torrid rumors of an affair last year, and it made it to the mainstream media. Vanity Fair was reporting it. They had to deny it. But now New York Magazine, a reliable news gathering operation, reporting, quote, the worst kept secret in Washington, D.C. is Kristi Noem's affair with Corey Lewandowski. Stay away from him, Kristi. This is another picture I painted of Kristi Noem first thing in the morning, having breakfast with Lewandowski, telling him it's over. It's not going to end well, Kristi. Secret Service should keep an eye on. We want Kristi safe, and it's not going to be safe with her. If she is romantically involved with Corey Lewandowski, it's not going to end well. character counts. This is Elon Musk flashing one of 2 Zig Heils the night at a MAGA rally before Trump's inauguration earlier this year. Musk has donated millions to nativist right-wing politicians throughout Europe, as well as to Trump. He spoke earlier this year at a rally for Alternative for Germany, a party made up of neo-Nazis in Germany who promote the deportation of Muslims even when they're citizens of Germany. Last week, he spoke via video hookup to 150,000 anti-immigrant followers of Tommy Robinson. They gathered in London, and he told them, quote, "Violence is coming and that you either fight back or you die." A product of apartheid-era South Africa, Musk is big on the whole genes are destiny identitarian movement. He believes that white people are being replaced by people of color to the detriment of Western civilization. It's why he has so many children with carefully selected and vetted and screened women through in vitro to guarantee that his offspring's gene pool isn't contaminated by the wrong woman. It's all about the genes. Nativism is all about protecting our country's blood. Joshua Norman Haldeman was Elon's maternal grandfather, who was kept out of America during World War II because of his racist, anti-Semitic, and pro-Nazi views. Grandpa was one of the leaders of a Canadian movement that believed democracy should be replaced by high-functioning technocrats with superior intelligence. After World War II, when South Africa first instituted apartheid, he moved there for the apartheid and wrote numerous articles for Canadian newspapers extolling South African politicians for being brave enough to create an apartheid state. Now, Musk claims he was very young when his grandfather died. His grandfather, the technocrat who wants superior humans to run the world, died while piloting his own plane. So maybe not the Ubermensch he thought he was. But Musk claims, you can't blame me for my grandfather. He died when I was very young. He had no influence on me. But what about the genes? What about the genes, Elon Musk? You're a race scientist. You believe our ancestors speak to us through their DNA. It's why Elon Musk lies about a white genocide taking place right now in South Africa. That's your grandfather's DNA speaking. When you lie that white farmers are having their land seized, that lie, that's grandpa's DNA. That's your genes talking. It's why another race scientist, Donald Trump, granted political asylum to white South African farmers while denying the same to Haitian immigrants who are escaping real political oppression. Elon Musk, your genes, you spoke to Donald Trump's genes and told them to give white South African farmers political asylum here in the United States based on the lie that their land was being stolen. So yeah, that's Grandpa Haldeman talking. Those are his genes. It's about the genes. According to Musk and Trump, we need to protect our nation from immigrants, foreigners with bad genes. Turns out Elon Musk is an immigrant with bad genes. He was also in this country illegally. He's got bad genes, not just on his mother's side. That's Grandpa Haldeman, the pro-apartheid grandfather who seemed to love Hitler. That's his mother's genes. His father's genes, turns out, are pretty bad. His father's a purveyor of some rancid DNA. Elon Musk, turns out, when it comes to genes, is contaminated by both sides. Both parents contaminated his gene pool. You're looking at Errol Musk, the South African owner of an emerald mine, kindest people in the world, people who own emerald mines in South Africa. Errol Musk is Elon's father, who, like Elon, won't stop having kids. And according to the New York Times, he won't stop having his way with them as well. Headline from Tuesday's New York Times: Elon Musk's father accused of child sexual abuse. Errol Musk has been accused of sexually abusing 5 of his children and stepchildren since 1993. A New York Times investigation found family members have appealed to Elon Musk for help. Bad genes. Bad genes. So why is this a major story? Because if you're a race scientist, the way Elon Musk is, if you believe in preserving the purity of our nation's blood and that genes are destiny, then it's really important to unravel Elon Musk's genome to see what he's passing on to future generations. We need to ask whether someone at Elon Musk's fertility clinic, whether they should confiscate his golden turkey baster. So I'm just going to read from the New York Times. It's disturbing. It really is. This is from the New York Times. The allegations against Errol Musk involve 5 of his children and stepchildren, whom he was accused of abusing in South Africa and California, according to police and court records, personal correspondence, social workers, and interviews with family members. The earliest accusation was back in 1993 when Errol Musk's stepdaughter, then 4, told relatives he had touched her at the family house. A decade later, the stepdaughter said she caught him. I don't want to just, you can read this. Jesus. Oh my God. I can't. Anyway, some family members have also accused Errol Musk of abusing 2 of his daughters and a stepson. As recently as 2023, family members and a social worker attempted to intervene after his then 5-year-old son said his father had, all right, I'm not going to read that part. I just can't. A New York Times investigation found that a significant factor in Elon Musk's rupture with his father stems from accusations against Errol Musk of child sex abuse. The allegations have repeatedly spilled over into Elon Musk's life as relatives have contacted him for help, and he has sometimes taken action to intercede, according to personal letters, emails, and interviews with family members. And in the New York Times article, they talk about how Errol Musk pulled a Woody Allen, marrying like a step kid or something like that. Just really creepy stuff. So bad genes. Bad genes, Elon. You shouldn't be having any more kids. Former Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte was reelected as mayor of Davao City back in May of 2025, 2 months after he was arrested and sent to The Hague after an arrest warrant was issued accusing him of crimes against humanity. That arrest warrant was filed in February. According to prosecutors, as president of the Philippines and as mayor of Davao, Duterte, claiming he was fighting a war on drugs, sound familiar? Duterte organized his own extrajudicial death squads to kill rival gang members with no consideration of the law. According to the warrant, at least 76 people were killed by his private army. That's what authoritarians do. They become president or they become mayor, and they get their own extrajudicial thugs to storm the Capitol on January 6. Stuff like that. On Monday, Duterte, sitting in a Dutch prison, was officially charged by The Hague with crimes against humanity. A pretrial hearing scheduled for Tuesday has been postponed because his attorneys say Duterte is not fit for trial, quote, due to cognitive impairment in multiple domains, unquote. Well, then maybe he should step down as mayor of Davao City. On September 11th of this year, Brazil's Supreme Court sentenced former President Jair Bolsonaro, also known as the Trump of the Tropics, to 27 years in prison when they found him guilty of attempting to overthrow the government after losing his 2022 re-election campaign. Why does that sound familiar? In a 4-1 vote, a panel of Supreme Court justices this month ruled that Bolsonaro not only incited an insurrection, encouraging supporters to storm Congress, the presidential palace, and the Supreme Court, but he also plotted to assassinate the winner of that election, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva. So, as you know, Donald Trump is a huge supporter of Bolsonaro. He slapped a 50% tariff on Brazil to punish the country for putting his friend Bolsonaro on trial. Immediately after that insurrection, Bolsonaro fled to Florida, where he met with Donald Trump at Mar-a-Lago and received political advice from Steve Bannon. And Bolsonaro also spoke at CPAC's annual conference, where he was greeted as a conquering hero before returning to Brazil to face charges as an insurrectionist. Here he is. Here he is back home under house arrest. That's AI. But this is who the Republican Party supports. This is who Matt Schlapp invited to speak at CPAC just months after he launched an insurrection to overturn election results in Brazil. Matt Schlapp invited Bolsonaro to speak at CPAC after the guy launched an insurrection. He was found guilty of plotting to assassinate Lula and kidnap a Supreme Court justice. And we knew he was guilty. Matt Schlapp knew he was guilty. He invited him to speak at CPAC only months after that insurrection. Bolsonaro's son, Eduardo, who's an elected member of Brazil's Congress, but has been living here in the United States well past a 120-day leave of absence he took. So as of July, his leave of absence expired, and he should no longer be a member of Congress in Brazil because he doesn't live there anymore, but he refuses to resign. He was charged on Monday with attempting to intimidate prosecutors and judges so they would rule in favor of his father. Eduardo Bolsonaro also recently publicly took credit for convincing Trump to impose those 50% tariffs on the Brazilian people to punish them for punishing his dad. He took credit for destroying or trying to destroy the Brazilian economy as a form of revenge for prosecuting his father. On Sunday, tens of thousands of protesters showed up on the streets of Rio de Janeiro and Sao Paulo to challenge a bill sitting in the Brazilian legislature that would grant Bolsonaro amnesty for his crimes. That bill is being nicknamed the Bandit Bill. President Lula, who is up for re-election next year, threatened to veto that bill if it passes. On Monday, President Lula spoke before the UN's General Assembly, which is holding its big annual meeting in New York City so world leaders can gather under one roof and tie up traffic for people like David Feldman, who lives in Manhattan. It's a nightmare. In his speech, Lula addressed the conviction of Bolsonaro, saying, quote, "Our democracy is non-negotiable, unquote. Then Donald Trump got up to speak and said, yes, it is. It's negotiable. So I'm not going to dignify Donald Trump's speech before the UN. You can hear all about that insanity from everyone else. Trump is a liar, a showman, he's a circus freak. So it doesn't matter what Trump says. It matters what he and the people working under him do. Trump did say during his UN speech that he talked briefly with Lula, President Lula of Brazil, in the UN corridors. They apparently even embraced. Trump added that's a good sign. And then said he and Lula would meet next week. Well, let's see if that meeting actually takes place. Okay? Because Trump also said he was going to meet with Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer to avert a government shutdown, and then he changed his mind. Trump says a lot of things. Like earlier at the top of the show, he said, I think Zelensky doesn't have to cede territory to Putin. I think he can win. He says a lot of things. He's in a permanent state of campaign. So remember last year, he said everything to everyone. Let's see if that meeting with Lula actually takes place. Let's see if Lula can come to the White House and convince Trump to drop those 50% trade tariffs on Brazil. Although I don't think Lula is too concerned about those 50% trade tariffs, since America has a trade surplus with Brazil. We have a $30 billion trade surplus with Brazil. In other words, Brazil buys more crap from the United States than we buy from them. And it's been that way for nearly 20 years. So that 50% tariff that he's putting on Brazil, it's only hurting us, not Brazil. Not really, but Trump's a moron. He thinks anyway. Let's move on. This is Kimberly Gargoyle. She is the former wife of Gavin Newsom. Yes. And as recently as the inauguration this year, she was the girlfriend of Donald Trump Jr., who threw Kimberly Gargoyle to the curb right after the inauguration. As part of her non-disclosure agreement, Trump nominated Kimberly Gargoyle to be our new ambassador to Greece, and she was finally confirmed by the Senate Friday after Majority Leader John Thune used the nuclear option to fast-track a large swath of Trump appointees over the objections of Democrats. Here is Kimberly Gargoyle flying solo. I think she's over Paris right now, on her way to Greece, where she will take up residence in the ambassador's mansion in Athens. Also confirmed on Friday to serve as our nation's ambassador to the United Nations was Mike Waltz, who briefly served this year as our nation's national security advisor. Remember Mike Waltz? He was our national security advisor until he put together that Signal group chat to monitor the airstrikes over Yemen in March. Waltz, our then national security advisor, was told, hey, don't use any Signal group chats because they're not secure, but Waltz did it anyway and ended up accidentally including Jeffrey Goldberg, a reporter for The Atlantic, in that Signal group chat, who he was able to monitor the airstrikes on Yemen in real time. So Waltz was dismissed, replaced by Marco Rubio, who's also serving as our nation's Secretary of State, and they made Waltz our ambassador to the UN. Well, Trump nominated him, and the Senate confirmed him Friday, just in time for the big General Assembly meeting on Monday. During his first speech before the United Nations, Ambassador Waltz told the UN Security Council, quote, "We will defend every inch of NATO territory. This as Russian drones and Russian jet fighters stray into Poland, Estonia, Romania, and international waters over the Baltic Sea." Poland was actually hit by Russian drones, and Trump said, well, that was probably a mistake. The Russian ambassador to the UN said none of these reports of drones and jet fighters violating European territory are true. So at the top of the show, I said Trump says Zelensky can win, right? But as you know, he's a liar. He will say whatever you want to hear so he can win you over. And then he does what's best for Trump. As I said on the last show, there currently is a bipartisan bill sitting in Congress. It was written by Lindsey Graham. and I think Blumenthal from Connecticut, the Democrat. And this bill would slap 500%, not 50%, 500% tariffs on any country purchasing oil from Russia. And we know that China, India, and Turkey is a member of NATO, those are the three biggest buyers of Russian oil. All summer, as Putin intensified his air attacks on Ukraine, showing no desire to negotiate a ceasefire, Trump publicly gave him ultimatums, warning that if you don't sit down at the bargaining table with Zelensky, I'm going to impose massive economic sanctions, much tougher than the ones already put into place by Joe Biden. So those sanctions that he's talking about are the 500% tariffs on countries buying Russian oil. Remember the Nord Stream pipelines were blown up? Remember that? There's a reason somebody blew those pipelines up. Russia depends on selling gas. By some estimates, Russian gas and oil exports finance nearly half the budget for Putin's federal government. So Trump keeps threatening sanctions, 500% tariffs on anybody who buys Russian oil. He keeps giving Putin a deadline, and every time that deadline passes and Trump balks, no economic sanctions. And now he's blaming Europe. It's never his fault. He's saying it's Europe's fault because Europe, he says, is still buying its gas and oil from Russia. And there's always a germ of truth to what Trump says. It is true that Europe still buys some gas and oil from Russia. So he's saying, I'm not going to impose these sanctions until you guys stop buying Russian oil. Well, yeah, as I said, Europe does buy some of its gas and oil still from Putin. Not much, about 8 to 10%. Turkey, Slovakia, and Hungary are the real bad guys in this. They're the ones buying the most oil. But by making this demand on Europe to stop buying oil and gas from Russia, he's essentially kicking the oil can down the road so he doesn't have to confront Putin by imposing 500% tariffs on countries that buy Russian oil. He does that, the war in Ukraine is over. According to some reports, half of Russia's budget comes from exporting oil. You cut off Russia's oil, you stop the war in Ukraine. In his speech before the UN on Monday, Trump lectured Europe that they must stop buying oil from Russia. And in so doing, that indemnifies him. It's not me who's cozying up to Putin. It's you. You're still buying his oil. In March of 2022, right after the invasion of Ukraine, Exxon quietly abandoned its multi-billion-dollar investment in Sakhalin 1. It's an oil project in Russia. Exxon owns 30% of it. By August of 2022, this is the year Putin invaded Ukraine, he punished Exxon, seized control of Exxon's assets in Russia, forcing Exxon to sue, demanding Putin reimburse them for that company's multi-billion-dollar loss. Kind of like Venezuela, I talked about that 2 shows ago. Venezuela nationalized the oil companies in 2007, and Exxon says they're owed billions. Well, the same thing is going on in Russia. It's a little different, though. Earlier this month, it's been reported that Exxon officials met privately, secretly, with executives from Russia's state-owned oil company, Rosneft, to see if they would be willing to return that 30% ownership of the Sakhalin 1 project. Exxon said, this is not about, so when it was exposed, Exxon explained, This isn't, wait a second, we're not doing new business with Russia. This is old business with Russia. We're just trying to recoup our nearly $5 billion investment in that Russian refinery project. I think it's Sakhalin 1. So Putin reportedly has given the green light for Rosneft, the Russian state-owned oil company, to begin allowing foreign corporations like Exxon to resume investments in Russian oil. So, given that Donald Trump's very first Secretary of State in the first Trump administration was Rex Tillerson, who left his job as CEO of Exxon to come and work in the Trump White House, given that Putin awarded Rex Tillerson the Order of Friendship in 2013, which is the highest honor the Kremlin can bestow upon a foreigner, given that Exxon and the oil industry secretly dumped hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars into the election last year to get Trump back in the Oval Office, and given that the war with Ukraine is now costing Exxon close to $5 billion in Russian oil, if they made a $5 billion investment in Russian oil that they lost, that means they plan to make $50 billion over the next decade. If you put up $5 billion for Salkin 1, that means you plan to make $50 billion over 10 years. So what do you think Trump is going to do about China, India, and Hungary buying Russian oil? What do you think Trump cares more about? Ukrainian independence and sovereignty, or Exxon's $5 billion Russian investment that will bring in $50 billion over the next decade? Viktor Orban, the authoritarian leader of Hungary, who one could argue wrote the playbook for Trump's seizure of power this year. If you want to know what laboratory of authoritarianism Trump was doing his studies, look at Viktor Orban in Hungary. He's telling the UN that Hungary will continue to purchase its oil from Russia. Now, Hungary is a member of NATO. Hungarian Foreign Minister Peter Szijjártó saying it's physically impossible for Hungary to stop purchasing its gas and oil from Russia, adding that decades of infrastructure have been put in place, making it a fantasy to think Hungary can suddenly get its energy someplace else. Well, Orban's Fidesz party over the years has been secretly financed by Russia, which is why Hungary, under the leadership of Viktor Orban, has dragged its feet on agreeing to economic sanctions against Russia after the Russian invasion of Ukraine. In the past 10 years, Russia has guaranteed loans for Hungary's nuclear power plants, while Viktor Orban, the authoritarian leader of Hungary, has increased his nation's dependence on Russian oil and gas, with about 60% of their oil and gas now coming from Russia. This is the Mop-Up. I'm David Feldman in New York City. Thank you so much for joining me. Please like this episode so I remain in your feed. Please subscribe to my channel, my newsletter. Hit the notifications bell. So many of you complain that you can't find this show, especially on YouTube, that you used to be able to find it. You can't find it anymore. If you hit the notifications bell, that's, and if you already hit the notifications bell, hit it again, because things are, Maduro's YouTube channel in Venezuela just got taken down. So we now turn to Gaza. Israeli ground troops move deeper into Gaza City on Monday with reports of at least 37 Palestinians killed. 19 women and children were among the 40 killed Sunday during Israeli airstrikes on Gaza. Gaza's health ministry reporting patients inside Gaza City hospitals face certain death in the coming weeks as the Israeli military orders all the residents of Gaza City to leave. It is estimated that 500,000 Palestinians have already evacuated Gaza City. The U.S. State Department's spokesperson, Michael Mitchell, told Al Jazeera on Tuesday, this is interesting. This is Michael Mitchell. He's the U.S. State Department spokesperson. He said that the Trump administration supports Israel but does not agree with everything that's happening to the people of Gaza. This is beginning to be a political albatross for the Trump administration. The State Department also said talk of a Palestinian state is off the table until the fighting ends. Meanwhile, Israeli soldiers ramp up fighting in the West Bank, with reports that Palestinians living there are now sealed off from neighboring Jordan after Israel closed the King Hussein Bridge, which provides the only way for food, goods, and services to be exchanged between Jordan and the West Bank. The Gaza Health Ministry says 65,283 Palestinians have been killed since war began. That's according to Al Jazeera. But many say that number is an extreme undercount, with thousands reportedly still unaccounted for beneath the rubble. In his speech before the UN General Assembly on Tuesday, Donald Trump declared the war in Gaza must end, but offered no solutions. In his speech before the UN, Brazil's President Lula warned that the Palestinian people are at risk of completely disappearing. Brazil last week joined the International Criminal Court of Justice and signed on to South Africa's lawsuit accusing Israel of violating the 1948 Genocide Convention. On Sunday, Pope Leo, in his Sunday Mass, spoke out against the forced displacement of the Palestinian people, especially in Gaza, who, he said, quote, are once again being forced from their lands. The Pope said the Catholic Church stands in solidarity with the people of Gaza and their, quote, martyred land. Around the corner from the Vatican, tens of thousands of protesters took to the streets of Rome and across Italy to speak out against war in Gaza, some blocking ports and roads that they believed are supplying ships heading for Israel. Pop singer Dua Lipa publicly fired her agent after he said he was in favor of the Glastonbury Music Festival canceling a performance by the Belfast rap band Kneecap, who are known for leading their audience in chants of free Palestine. Glastonbury didn't cancel them, but Dua Lipa fired her agent. She is still with William Morris, that's her agency, but she demanded a new agent within the company. I'm sure Ari Emanuel was very accommodating. In the past year, Israel has launched attacks against Yemen, Iran, Syria, Lebanon, Tunisia, and Qatar. There are now reports that far-right members of Netanyahu's war cabinet are thinking of airstrikes on Turkey because its leader, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, has reportedly spoken favorably about Hamas while comparing Benjamin Netanyahu to Hitler. Appearing on Fox News this week, Erdogan, the president of Turkey, said, quote, I don't see Hamas as a terrorist organization. On the contrary, I see it as a resistance group. They are using what they have tried to defend themselves. They are using what they have to try to defend themselves, unquote. Turkey hosts several leaders of Hamas, and in the past year, Turkey has arrested several Israelis, accusing them of spying for Mossad. On Monday, Turkey suspended all economic ties and trade with Israel as talk of an impending Israeli airstrike increases. Turkey, of course, is a member of NATO, which makes an Israeli attack less likely due to NATO's Articles 4 and 5, which we've become all too familiar with as Russian drones and jet fighters stray into European airspace. Before the big UN meeting in Manhattan this week, 140 nations around the world recognized Palestinian statehood, although they really couldn't go into specifics as to what a Palestinian state would look like. 140 nations recognized Palestine. Today, that number is 150. Nearly the entire world, except the United States and Israel, recognized Palestinian statehood, which, forestalling some massive shift in the tectonic plates of geopolitical power, can't really happen until the United States and Israel also sign on to Palestinian statehood. As his soldiers move deeper into Gaza, ordering all Palestinians to huddle in the south, Benjamin Netanyahu has repeatedly stated this year that there will never be a Palestinian state so long as he is leader of Israel. Al Jazeera reporting that it's been nearly 108 years since Great Britain's Balfour Declaration called for a Jewish homeland, but not one for Palestinians, in what was then Palestine, a territory belonging to the Ottoman Empire. After World War I, because the Ottomans sided with Germany, Palestine became a British mandate, and the Balfour Declaration served as one of the building blocks for an eventual Jewish state. Al Jazeera reporting nearly 108 years after Great Britain committed to a Jewish state with the Balfour Declaration, it is now committing to a Palestinian state in direct defiance of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Donald Trump. For those of you who are confused, the Balfour Declaration is not Balfour, written by New York Mets pitcher Jim Bouton. It's two completely. Balfour by Jim Bouton had nothing to do with Palestine. It was all about the Mets. Jim Bouton. Big McGovern supporter, by the way. Jim Bouton, one of my heroes when I followed sports. As world leaders gathered in Manhattan for the annual UN meeting of the General Assembly, a flood of nations, including France, Canada, and Australia, called for a Palestinian state. They all have slightly different ideas on what that Palestinian state would look like and how it would come about. But countries like France, Canada, Australia, and Britain are saying whatever a Palestinian state looks like, it cannot include Hamas. French President Emmanuel Macron, in calling for a Palestinian state, said the region requires what he called an international stabilization force inside post-war Gaza to prop up a Palestinian Authority similar to the one in the West Bank. It would have to be free from Hamas leadership. Macron said France will refuse to open up an embassy in this Palestinian state until all the hostages are free and a ceasefire is in place. France and Saudi Arabia hosted a two-state solution conference at the UN on Monday to study ways in which Palestinians could have their own country without turning parts of Israel over to them. It was always assumed that the West Bank and Gaza, two non-contiguous territories currently occupied by Israel, that Gaza and the West Bank would be handed over to a Palestinian state. But meaningful discussions about a two-state solution were shut down in 2000 after Bill Clinton failed to convince then Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak and Palestinian leader Yasser Arafat to sign on. It is believed Bill Clinton in 2000 came the closest to a two-state solution. That was nearly 25 years ago. It's also believed that one of the reasons Saudi princes financed the attacks of 9/11 a year later is because George W. Bush lost interest in pursuing a two-state solution. The United States and Israel boycotted Monday's two-state solution conference at the United Nations. Israel called it a circus and a charade. Secretary of State Marco Rubio calling it, quote, an unproductive and ill-timed publicity stunt that would ultimately prolong the war, reward Hamas, and undermine peace efforts. With the world turning on him and not seeming, and he doesn't seem to care, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu redoubled his opposition to a Palestinian nation by saying, quote, I have a clear message for you. It won't happen. A Palestinian state will not be established west of the Jordan River. We will continue on this path, unquote. Netanyahu warned that Israel would retaliate diplomatically, possibly expelling from Jerusalem diplomats from any nations that recognize a Palestinian state. Recalling the events of October 7th, 2023, Netanyahu called recognition of a Palestinian state, quote, a massive prize to terror. Antonio Guterres, a socialist from Portugal, now serves as Secretary General of the United Nations. He's held that post since 2017, socialist. He was reelected to a second term that expires in December of 2026. He calls a one-state solution, quote, with the subjugation of the Palestinian people without rights, absolutely intolerable, unquote. UN Chief Guterres took exception to Netanyahu saying statehood for Palestinians rewards terrorism by saying, quote, statehood is a right, not a reward. Isaac Herzog has been Israel's president since 2021. President of Israel is primarily a ceremonial role, but Herzog said recognizing a Palestinian state won't help one single Palestinian. Itamar Ben-Gvir is Israel's far-right extremist minister of national security. He's a homunculus, to say the least, after calls for Palestinian statehood became louder in the lead-up to this week's big UN meeting. Gvir said, now is the time for Israel to reoccupy all of the West Bank. On Sunday, Israel's finance minister, Bezalel Smotrich, stated, quote, the days are over when Britain and other countries determine our future. The only response to an anti-Israeli move is sovereignty over the homeland territories of the Jewish people in Judea and Samaria, and removing the folly of the Palestinian state idea from the agenda forever, unquote. Judea and Samaria is how far-right extremists in Israel define the West Bank, which they say was promised to them in the Old Testament. I'm David Feldman, reminding you to stay strong and protect the weak. Please like this episode so I remain in your feed. Please share it and hit the notifications bell. I will try to do a show tomorrow. Thank you.